Having a look at the elements of text response, we can visualize all of this on a pyramid. The majority of what we use is our evidence. So this is our structural devices, the language features used by the author, the quotes, and the names for the language devices and structural features that the author is using. Then, when we analyze, we are touching on, you know, when we're zooming in, what this evidence says about a theme in the text or the characters in a text. However, we keep doing this process, building on evidence and analysis a few times per body paragraph until we have enough evidence and it's justified enough to lead into some kind of big picture views and values statement. And this is our linking sentence. So we don't have much views and values in our essay overall. It's at the ends of, paragraphs, but that's because these ideas need to be justified and supported through evidence and analysis, which we will spend a lot more of our essay doing. And hopefully that pyramid helps to visualize how it all works. So our views and values, how can we analyze them? Let's have a look at an example. Say we have a structural feature such as a metaphor. Our analysis, we want that to center on discussing what the metaphor represents because we know it's a type of figurative language where there is implied meaning. And then we want to go into authorial intent to show what's the author's message, views and values message in utilizing that metaphor to represent that idea. Let's have a look with an example from the film Rear Window. Structural feature, we're going to use the metaphorical, physical, and symbolic boundaries. So when characters leave their apartments and enter public spaces, they are confronted with danger. So our analysis, what does this represent? We might say it creates unease when characters cross physical boundaries. So what's the potential authorial intent? What's the message of the author? Hitchcock suggests the impossibility of regulating one's boundaries or that the blurring of one's ethical and physical boundaries are inevitable. So, the reason we face danger when we cross physical boundaries is because we cannot control what happens in the world outside, how people are going to treat us, and the kinds of things are going to happen. We want that control over regulating our boundaries and our privacy, but that's impossible as we live in a society. So it is some sort of commentary on the human condition, how humans function within a society. Next, having a look at characters and themes. Huge thing to consider here is that characters are only a construct or a product of the author to comment on themes and create these overarching messages. So it means that we need to talk about them appropriately and phrase sentences appropriately in essays referring to these characters. So we can't say things like, the character cries, because the character isn't living, right? So instead, we'll use our writer does authorial intent verbs. Say the author predicts or presents the character as crying to convey or illustrate or suggest something, leading into our analysis. Being very, very, very aware that the character is not carrying out the actions, the author is creating those actions for the character. So making sure we're using the appropriate vocabulary. Let's look at a specific example. Taji is compelled by her values of social justice upon hearing brutal torture stories. Well, so what? But also, Taji isn't compelled. The author is depicting her, right, as being compelled. So let's say Satrapi presents Taji as being compelled by her values of social justice upon hearing brutal torture stories to convey Iranian society's confusion between vengeance and justice. So she's only being presented as being compelled. She is not compelled because she's a construct, because she's a character. Being really mindful, this is something that's a really easy habit to practice and a really easy issue to fix in your writing. Structural devices. We know there are a lot of structural devices in every single text, but we really want our analysis to center around text-specific, genre-specific structural devices more than anything else, to show that we really have that intimate knowledge of the text and we're only using what's most relevant and most prevalent within the text. So, for example, if we're working with films, we have mise en scène, all of the things we can see in a scene or a shot, costume, what the actors are wearing, lighting, sound, diegetic sound being the sounds that the characters themselves can hear, and non diegetic sound being the sounds that the characters themselves cannot hear, but the audience can. For example, a soundtrack. We can hear the soundtrack as the audience. It's used to create a certain effect or relay a certain emotion, but the characters themselves cannot hear soundtracks. For poetry or novels, we have a range of literary devices such as metaphors, allusions, referring to something, irony, oxymorons, opposites, imagery, foreshadowing that something is going to happen, and then poetry specific rhyme and enjambment. And for plays, having their own genre specific features as well, stage directions, chorus, props, lighting, sound. So make sure you study and you have a range of potential evidence to use that's your text specific structural devices to ensure you have that you satisfy that criteria for having relevant and complex evidence and analysis. So how do we go about, we've looked at views and values, but how do we go about discussing or analyzing a structural device? So first off, we want to find a structural device to discuss. We need to make sure then we link it to relevant quotes. So we need evidence for everything that we're saying. We can't just have, the meta language term for what the structural device is and not have a quote that's showing where it's happening and what it is. And then we're going to move on to analyze it, simply answering to ourselves, what is the author implying or suggesting or endorsing or critiquing here? Looking at this example, Romeo's use of celestial metaphors and cosmic imagery of the sun and moon, hence unobtainable matters, emphasizes his own presence in his own romantic yet distorted reality. So we see in blue, we have that amazing meta language, really elevated language, identifying specifically what the structural devices are, celestial metaphors and cosmic imagery, paying attention to how they have adjectives attached to make it very specific and show that flavor. And then linking it to the quotes sun and moon, short, very succinct quotes, which is very, very good. And in pink, we have that analysis, romantic yet distorted reality. It continues to progress. The celestial associations in Romeo's descriptions of Juliet's eyes as two of the fairest stars in all the heaven that twinkle in their spheres till they return further dramatize Romeo's quixotic views, further building on and developing our argument. This is emphasized as Shakespeare uses I and I interchangeably when Romeo questions whether they are in her head or I in heaven, to connect the notion of Romeo's dreamlike thoughts with the aforementioned blindness. The rhyme of Dark and Mark between Benvolio's line and Mercutio's if love be blind, love cannot hit the mark reveals and accentuates Romeo's blindness and adolescent naivety. So we've had quite a bit of analysis. You can really see how you can develop a body paragraph by doing this process of evidence and analyze, evidence and analyze, evidence and analyze. And then we lead into our linking sentence, which has our views and value statement, because we've used a lot of evidence and we can justify a views and value statement with all of the evidence that we've used. Therein, Shakespeare suggests that it is adolescent blindness that ultimately led to Romeo and Juliet's tragic fate. Overall, overarching statement. Not one that is particularly complex either, so hopefully very understandable for all of you guys.